Today we're going to start chapter 5, and we're going to learn how to write code in a way that it repeats itself. So sometimes you write a piece of code and you want this piece of code to run many, many times. For example, let's say I have some code here that is calculating the area of a circle. So here I am asking the user for the radius. And so I'm going to ask it for the radius. I'm going to assume that it can be a float. So I'm going to ask them, what is the radius of the circle? They enter the radius of the circle. And my job is to calculate the area. So I'm going to say area equal to pi times the radius squared. Now this is going to do it how many times? It's going to only do it one time. So if I run this code, it's going to ask me one time for the radius, and it's going to print it out, and that's it. What if I want to ask the user for the radius many, many times? So the easiest thing to do is to just copy this code and paste it again. And if I want to ask them 3 times, I'll paste it 3 times. Now, if I want to ask them 100 times, how many times do I need to paste it? 100? Unrealistic. And if I find a mistake and I say, oh, the question should have had an uppercase W, now how many times do I have to modify this question? Or 3 times, many, many times. So this is not realistic. What we want to do is we want to write a piece of code one time, and we want to wrap it in some kind of code that says, run these 3 lines multiple times. And so that is the purpose of today's lesson, learning how we can do that. So to do that, we have to have a question that we ask. And this question, basically, if the answer is true, it's going to go and do that body of the loop, that code that I want to repeat multiple times. And when that test question or test expression becomes false, I exit the loop. So here is an example of a while statement written. Let's try to understand what it is, and then we'll look at the flow chart. Here, what we're doing is we're starting the program with a variable n equals 5. Let's go and draw this out so we can see what's happening in the background. So let me just open up Paint. So we want to see this n, how it's going to be changing in RAM. So we're starting off with a variable n in RAM, and we set it to 5. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're doing. And then here we have a while. Think of the while as an if statement. Think of it as a question. So here it's basically saying if n is greater than 0. It's asking, is n greater than 0? It's a question. Is n greater than 0? Now 5 is greater than 0. So the answer is yes. So because the answer to this question is yes, it's true, it's going to go and do what's underneath. So here, what's underneath says print me n. So if this is my output, it's going to print 5. Okay, so this is the output. Okay, it prints 5. And then it's going to say n equal to n minus 1. So n is going to be 5 minus 1, which is 4. So now n is 4. Now an if statement would just end and go and do the blast off and all that. But because this is a while loop, what happens is that the code after the body of the while loop happens is executed. It's going to wrap around again and ask the question again. So after we set n to n minus 1, it's going to go back and it's going to ask the question again. Basically, this loop is running while n is greater than 0. So as long as n is greater than 0, I'm going to keep doing what's underneath. If it was an if statement, this would happen only one time. But because it's a while, it's going to happen as long as n is greater than 0. So now, is 4 greater than 0? The answer is yes. So it's going to print out 4. And then it's going to say n equal to n minus 1. So it's going to make it 3. It's going to wrap around again and check 3 greater than 0. Yes. Print 3 and make it minus 1. Make it 2. 2 greater than 1? Sorry, than 0? Yes. Print 2 and subtract 1 from it. 1 greater than 0? Yes. Print 1 and make it 0. And now the question is 0 greater than 0? The answer is no. 0 is not greater than 0. If there was an equal sign, we would say true. But 0 is not greater than 0. They're equal. And so now it fails. This question now fails. And when it fails, it drops out of the loop. It doesn't do what's inside the loop, and it's going to print blast off. And then it's going to print the variable n, and n is 0. So this loop, like it shows you here, is printing the numbers from 5 down to 1, blast off, and then 0. So this is how you would do a while loop. Now, I'm going to jump to slide 7 and then go back to slide 6. When you are writing a loop, there are 3 questions that you have to ask yourself. What's my starting point? So here, when I was printing, what was the first number that I wanted to print? Well, the first number that I wanted to print was 5. And that's why the code had n equal to 5 at the beginning. That was my starting point. The next question you need to ask yourself, when do I want to stop? What is the test that I need to do so that this loop eventually stops? Because you want the loop to eventually stop, right? So what is the test that I want to write so that this loop will eventually stop? So I want it to write until it reaches 1. So next to my while, my test has to be written in a way that tests between 5 and 1, or here we did 0. So as long as n is greater than 0, I want to continue. Once it hits 0, I want to stop. And so this is how I would write my test that makes the loop stop. So first I have to ask myself, what's my starting point? The next I have to ask, when am I stopping so I can end this loop? And finally, after I do whatever I want to do for that variable n, how do I want to do it the next time? So after I print n equals 5, what is the next variable that I want to print? Well, the next variable that I want to print was 4. How do I get from 5 to 4? Well, I subtract 1. So that's why our update was n equal to n minus 1. That was my update because I'm going down. If I was going like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would add 1. But because I'm going down, I'm going backwards, I'm subtracting 1. So those are the 3 parts that we will always ask ourselves when we are writing a loop. Now let's go to our code here. And let's say I wanted to ask the user for the radius of a circle 3 times. Okay, so I want to ask them 3 times. So I want to kind of start counting. Here we go. I'm going to start counting from 1. And I want to go up to 3. So I would say while count, for example, is less than or equal to 3. So I want to do it. I want to count first radius, second radius, third radius. So I want to say first radius, second radius, third radius. So I'm going to start from 1. I'm going to go up to 3. Here I put an equal sign because I want to include 3. So 3 times I want to ask for the radius, print the area, calculate the area, and print it. Okay, now this loop, see this variable count that I'm starting with 1? This is the test that's also testing count when it reaches 3. What's left? So I have my starting point called the initialization. My ending point, when am I going to stop? I will end, I will stop. Okay, so I have a test that makes me end or stop. What's left? I initialized count, I'm testing on count. What's left is to update count. So after I've done it one time, I asked them for 1 radius. I want to say I counted already 1 time, so I'm going to add 1. So it becomes 2. So this is my update variable. Let's test this code and make sure that it runs 3 times. So what is the radius of the circle? 10, 20, 30. It ran only 3 times. This variable that we're initializing, testing on, and updating is called the control variable. So this is the variable that's controlling the loop, controlling how many times this loop will run. So this code, this loop will run 3 times from count equal to 1, 2, and 3. So this loop runs 3 times. Now let's look at another example in the slides and try to understand what it's doing. So here I have a variable, more quizzes equal to y. So I'm initializing a variable and I'm setting it equal to y. And I'm saying while more quizzes is equal, so it's testing if more quizzes is equal to the letter y. Now, initially, is it equal to y? Yes. So that means this loop will initially start. So I'm setting a variable that will say start up this loop. What is this loop doing? It's asking the user for a grade. It's saying enter your grade for the quiz. The user is going to enter their grade, whatever they got, 19, for example. Then it says enter the maximum grade possible. So it's saying, what is the quiz out of? So it was possible 20. So the user, for example, said 19 and it was out of 20. Notice it's converting it to a float because we want to allow decimal numbers. Maybe they got 19.5. So here we're asking for the grade of the quiz. We're asking what it was out of. We're calculating their grade. We're dividing the points by the possible. And now we are displaying it to the user with 2 digits after the decimal. And we calculated their percent. What do we want to do now? We want to see if the user wants to enter another quiz. So we ask them, do you want to enter another quiz? And if they say yes, they enter a y. We save that in a variable. And we go back and we check. So while the user is pressing the letter y, it's going to go and ask them. So here, I don't know how many times the user will enter the grade. So in my code here, I know I was doing it in a way that I was asking the user 3 times. How about if I wanted to make it so that the user decides when to stop? So this loop will calculate the area as long as the user wants to. So here, because I don't know how many times, I'm going to do something like the quiz, the slides. So I'm going to start and say enter, or let's say I'm going to say enter more. So I'm going to set it equal to yes, and here I'm going to just say use the word yes instead of the letter y, and we could use a letter or we could use a word. So here I'm asking enter more, so I'm going to ask them while, I'm going to say while enter more. So here, this is my starting, my initialization. While they say yes, so I'm forcing it here to start. So I am forcing the code to start asking. This is my test that will eventually make me stop. So while they're saying yes, what is it that I want to do? Well, here I'll just copy these 3 lines of code because that's what I want to do. I want to ask them for the radius. I'm going to calculate the area and print. What is left? I have my variable, my control variable. I initialized it. I'm testing. What's the third thing? Update. So always, whenever you're writing a loop, always ask yourselves, where's my starting, where's my test, and where's my update? So here, I'm going to say enter more. And where's the update coming from? It's coming from the user. So I'm going to ask them, enter another radius or quit. Well, we have to ask it in a way that they say yes, right? So, do you want to enter another radius? And then here, enter yes or no. You have to tell the user what they have to enter. You have to tell them what the options are. And so here, if they type in yes, it's going to keep doing. So let's test that. So if I say 10, it does it. If I immediately say no, it stops. But if I keep asking it, keep entering, so yes, 20, yes, 4, yes, and I just keep going, it keeps asking me until I say no, and then it stops. So here we wrote a loop that was running as long as the user said yes. Okay. Next class, we're going to actually see more uses of the while loop, but for now, I just want to give you an overview of how the while loop works. Now, let's do some practice together. And let's see if you can figure out what this code is going to do. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and figure out what the code is going to do, and then unpause it and see if you got the right answer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of draw again in Paint what's happening so that we can understand what's going on in the background. So let's go to Paint, and we have a variable num that we're starting off with 0. So I'm going to set num to 0. And then it says while num is less than or equal to 5. So it's checking, is 0 less than or equal to 5? The answer is yes. 0 is less than or equal to 5. It's going to print num. So here's what it's printing. It prints num, which is 0. And then it's saying num plus equal 1. So it's adding 1 to num. So it's making it 1. And then it's going up and saying, is 1 less than or equal to 5? It is. It's going to print num and make it plus 1. And it's going to keep doing that. Print 2, make it 3, print 3, make it 4, print 5, make the number 5, and then it's going to check, is 5 less than or equal to 5? The answer is yes. So it's going to, sorry, I printed it early already. 3, this is 4. 5, it prints 5, and then it comes, makes num plus equal 1, so it makes it 6. And now when it checks, is 6 less than or equal to 5? The answer is false. It is not. So it drops out of the loop, it finished the loop, and it prints outside of the loop, and it prints the number. So this is the output that we see it printing for us. Okay. Here's another example. Again, pause the video and try to figure out what it's doing, and then unpause and see if you got it right. So let's start up Paint again. Let's start a new file and start again. We have I equal to 5, so we have I is 5. And we're asking, is I less than 10? Is 5 less than 10? Yes, it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print I. So I'm going to print 5. And then I'm going to say I plus equal 1. So the 5 becomes a 6. And then I check, is 6 less than 10? Yes. So I'm going to print 6, make it 7. 7 less than 10? Yes. Print 7. Print 7. Make it 8. 8 less than 10? Yes. Print 8. Make it 9. 9 less than 10? Yes. Print 9. Make it 10. Now, 10 less than 10? The answer is no. And so that is why here this loop eventually stops, but it stops at 9. 10 is not included because there is no equal sign. Now, could I write a loop in a way that it never ends? Yes. If you write a loop that never ends, that's called an infinite loop. And there are many ways to have an infinite loop. So let's write an infinite loop. Let's comment this code out and let's write some infinite loops that will never finish. So let's go up to the top and let's write some infinite loops. So for example, what we were just seeing is how to print numbers in a range. So if I say n equal 1 while n is less than 10, print me n. So I want to print the numbers from 1 to 10. So I'm going to print 1. If I want to include 10, I should put an equal sign here. So print n, and then we say n plus equal 1. So if I run this loop, it prints me the numbers from 1 to 10. It's not an infinite loop. Now, what if I forget to update n? What will happen? Let's see what happens. It's printing 1 forever. It's not stopping. Why? Because I forgot to update. So here I got an infinite loop, and I think my Mew has just hung. But I got an infinite loop because I forgot my update. So if you forget your update, you will run into an infinite loop. And I hope you get it back so we can continue this video. Okay, so one way to get an infinite loop is if you forget your update. Now, what should we do? Let's just start Notepad and I'll show you some other examples of infinite loops until my Mew responds. So we said one way to get an infinite loop is if I forget. Okay, so here, this was the example that we were looking at, n equals 1. And we said while n is less than or equal to 10, we said print n. And then we said we didn't have anything. So we forgot our update. And because we forgot an update, we got an infinite loop. Let me show you another infinite loop. Okay, and I want you to tell me what's the problem with this loop. While 10, and good, it came back. So let's do another infinite loop. So here, let's do another infinite loop. N is 1. And while n is less than or equal to 10, I'm going to print n again. And I'm going to say n minus equal 1. Okay, so I'm subtracting 1 from n. Now, why will this give us an infinite loop? Let's run it and see what happens. Oh, I forgot to comment out the first one. Now we're hung again. But I want you to take a minute and think, why would this one also give an infinite loop? What are we doing? We didn't forget our initialization. We didn't forget our test. We didn't forget our update. What is it that we forgot to do or we did wrong? So here we're starting off n with 1. 1 less than or equal to 10? Yes. We're going to print 1. And then what are we doing to n? We're subtracting 1 from it. So the 1 is going to become a 0. Now, is 0 less than or equal to 10? Yes. We're going to print 0 and we're going to make it negative 1. Negative 1 less than or equal to 10? Yes. Print negative 1 and make it negative 2. Is n ever going to reach 10? Never. Why? Because we're always subtracting 1 from n here. And so here, this is also an infinite loop because we are updating n wrong. So this is an example of an infinite loop because we are updating n wrong. So if you forget to update your control variable, the variable that's controlling when the loop is starting, when the loop is stopping, if you forget to update your control variable or you update it wrong, then you will run into an infinite loop and you will hang your mu like mine is hanging right now. Okay, so it's very important that when you're doing loops that you always ask yourself these 3 questions. What's my initialization? What's my starting point? What's my test? And how am I updating my control variable so that I eventually stop this loop?